Well, one key advisor to Cirque du Soleil during all of this recovery process is the enterprise software business SAP. This week at the same event where Nicole Tara spoke, I caught up with its President and Managing Director for Australia, Damien Bueno, and asked him a pretty simple question. With so much technology now used in companies to drive and improve productivity, why is it that our productivity performance has gone backwards so quickly?
Well, digital transformation, Ross, is a word that's used extensively, applied in different ways to different levels of success. And the way that we've captured this is really around some resilience research where we've looked to understand what are the challenges that organisations in Australia and globally are facing and what are the types of responses. And in Australia, the analysis would say that we're better than our global respondents in responding to those, but really there are critical issues inside of the Australia and its makeup, specifically as it relates to talent and skills. And this is a really important opportunity for for Australian companies to digitally transform how it makes its workforce more productive and how it can be more competitive as an economy.
Okay, so let's go to that issue of productivity, because a business like yours is supposed to improve the productivity of a business. You've been around for a long time, your competitors do the same thing. If that's the case, why is our productivity so poor in Australia right now?
So the productivity is challenged in Australia. In fact, it's at sort of 60-year lows. And it's on the back of a tightening supply side sort of situation. So SAP Solutions in a number of organisations may have been built 5 or 15 years ago to accommodate the circumstances of the time, but marketplaces are more dynamic, they move more quickly. And what we need to do with our technology is to allow that technology to adapt more readily to the changes in marketplaces, be them locally or be them external. And this is really the opportunity where we've moved away not only from a best practice, but a practice in our solutions that evolves. And it's the opportunity for Australian businesses to move progressively and continue to evolve and innovate. I look at solutions like generative AI to really power the next wave of innovation and also productivity in this country.
So is it a case where Australian businesses and business leaders are just a bit complacent when it comes to this productivity issue? Maybe government as well, that they haven't been shocked by any economic downturn, that they haven't been forced to make the changes, the big changes that they otherwise might have needed?
Australia's certainly been the benefit of working through a GFC in ways that weren't as challenging as other economies coming out of the pandemic, and we find ourselves in our current situation. But I subscribe to the view, and SAP does, that we need organisations and we need leaders with growth mindsets. And that's all about not how do we sort of survive today or how do we operate, but how do we thrive and how do we grow? What are the opportunities that exist? And you interviewed recently the Chief Growth Officer of Cirque du Soleil, and they were able to come out of a significant challenge post-COVID. They were able to ramp up their business really quickly, but in a more leaner and an agile way, and they really used SAP to power that in the way that they work with their supply chains, in the way that they manage their Forex exposures, in the way that they manage 4,000 staff globally. This is a multifaceted business, very complicated in a global market.
But I give my point there. They had a near-death experience. You don't wish a near-death experience on Australian corporations just to get them to make the dramatic changes that they otherwise should be doing anyway.
And I think this is part of the culture of Cirque, is that they defined a category. They evolved a category. Now they're looking at digital platforms. They're looking at creating games. So I would say it's more of the culture of that organisation to not only survive those challenges, but how do you evolve stronger? So again, I think that mindset took them through the pandemic in ways that are vastly different today from what they were 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so Australian companies over the years that I would observe have become more ambitious in their global aspirations. They've been more willing to try and buy and expand their businesses around the world. In many ways, the observation will be that government and government policy holds them back. The government doesn't change quickly enough, that the inertia is actually with government policy, not necessarily with what companies are doing.
I think government policy, if I look at areas like sustainability, promoting businesses in areas that are the next generation businesses, the work that we're doing in hydrogen, taking advantage of our comparative advantage as Australia, potentially our competitive advantage. These are all significant opportunities. SAP has actually partnered and incubated a company here locally called Green Token that actually supports the provenance of hydrogen so that organisations that are focused on alternative fuels, sustainable fuels, can actually evidence the fact that they're working in markets that produce things ethically in a compliant way and actually things that are good for the economy. So I think government is playing an active role. It needs to be more active. Business needs to be more active and in the way that it wants to progress these types of agendas as well.
Is it also a situation where government heaps too much compliance on business? In other words, part of the role of SAP is to actually get through most of the government's own work, collecting taxes, collecting superannuation, making certain you're complying with workplace laws. There's so many things that businesses do that are actually kind of like doing it for the government. Is this a part of the reason why productivity does not go forward?
Yeah, the world's a complicated place, Ross, and there are many stakeholders and interests. And at SAP, we very much subscribe to design with the end in mind. So these days, the way that government interacts with major corporates around the single touch payroll is a digital interaction. It's not the filling out of paper. So there are ways that we can work, that government and industry can work together to really create more streamlined processing. So government, who has to balance the books, understands what it needs to pay, and we can actually work with industry to develop digital solutions to automate the interactions and the accountabilities that corporates have to government. So all of these can be part of the design and the architecture of a modern society and modern economy. And again, the way that we design with the future in mind very much talks to how equipped are we today to manage the challenges such as productivity.
So is SAP a part of trying to identify the future risks that might affect a business? You think about data hacks we've seen in the past 12 or 18 months. Think about the reputational risks in the consultancy services right now that's led to government inquiries. These are risks that may not have been seen 5 years ago, but they're front and foremost right now in many organisations' minds, and there'll be others in the future.
So we're really focused on future-proofing organisations. If I think about the pandemic, Ross, we have a supply network that allows organisations to provide goods in a digital channel. We had about 40% increase in the adoption on both demand and supply side for organisations that were small to medium businesses that were able to put products and establish new challenges. This is sort of preempting the fact that people want access to markets, they want access to markets efficiently, so we can do that. As it relates to cyber threat, SAP's view is the cloud's absolutely critical, but that it be trusted is very important, that it be resilient to cyber threat is really important. So we have a raft of solutions, including what we've called a sovereign cloud here locally that's designed for organisations where the regulatory threshold is higher and they need to be compliant to meet those. So industry has a role to play in stepping in to help our customers get ahead of the next challenge.
So therefore, for Australia, you're Chief Executive SAP here in Australia, are you confident for the future of Australian businesses, for their culture and the way in which they will progress?
Yep. I'm optimistic as a person, Ross, and I'm optimistic about our prospects. We need to take decisive action. We need to look at the cloud as a powerhouse that can really accelerate our ability to do things. We need to look at solutions like generative AI that need to be responsible, but there are significant opportunity for us to scale and improve our productivity. And we really need to look ultimately at sustainability as a really important measure and for us to track and report on.
Damien, Bueno, many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ross.